Have you ever seen someone judged unfairly only to rise above it all? It was an oppressively humid Tuesday morning in mid-August when Marcus Bennett stepped out of his old pickup truck in the heart of Ridgefield, Georgia. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an orange glow over the small southern town. Marcus, the newly appointed police chief of Ridgefield PD, wore worn-out jeans, a faded blue t-shirt, and scuffed work boots. A simple baseball cap shielded his face from the sun. Marcus had intentionally chosen to arrive unannounced. His appointment had been finalized only a week ago, and he'd kept a low profile ever since. This was his style, observing things as they were, not as they were presented during a polished ceremony or press event. Ridgefield PD had a reputation, and not a good one. Rumors of internal corruption, unchecked prejudice, and abuse of authority had reached Marcus's ears long before his appointment. He wasn't naive about the challenge ahead. As a black man stepping into a leadership role in a predominantly white police department, Marcus knew he'd face resistance, but he wasn't here to make friends, he was here to make a difference. What would you do if you were in his shoes? The parking lot buzzed with activity. Officers leaned against their cruisers, sipping coffee and sharing jokes. Others shuffled in and out of the precinct, clipboards in hand. Marcus adjusted his cap and stepped into the side entrance of the station. The smell of stale coffee and worn leather chairs greeted him. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as he walked slowly, taking in the environment. He wasn't noticed at first, a tall black man dressed like someone who might have wandered in off the street. He didn't mind, that's exactly what he wanted. A smirk and a spit, "Hey, you," a sharp voice cut through the low hum of conversation. Marcus turned to see a white officer riding toward him, his badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The nameplate read Officer Kyle Stevens. His smirk was sharp, his eyes cold. "You lost, buddy, this isn't a shelter." Kyle's voice dripped with condescension. Behind him, two other officers leaned casually against a desk, watching the interaction unfold with amused expressions. Marcus remained silent, his steady gaze locked on Officer Stevens. Kyle stepped closer, his grin widening. "Did you hear me, pal? You don't belong here, take your dirty boots and walk right back out that door." The other officers chuckled, one slapped the desk, laughing loudly. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he remained composed. He had spent years in law enforcement, he had faced worse, but before he could respond, Kyle leaned in closer and spit. The warm saliva hit Marcus's cheek and dripped down slowly. Time froze. The laughter from the nearby officers erupted again, echoing through the hallway. Marcus inhaled sharply, his fists clenching at his sides. Slowly, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a neatly folded handkerchief, and wiped his face. His movements were deliberate, calm. "Is this how you treat everyone who walks through these doors?" Marcus asked, his voice low and steady. Kyle smirked again, "Only the ones who don't belong." Laughter rippled through the onlookers again. Marcus didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked purposefully down the hallway toward the briefing room, leaving Kyle and his audience behind. The reveal, the precinct's briefing room buzzed with conversation as officers shuffled in, coffee mugs in hand, laughing and exchanging stories. At the front of the room stood Captain James Holloway, a broad-shouldered man with sharp features and graying hair. "All right, settle down," Captain Holloway barked, and the room quieted. "As you all know, Chief Anderson retired last month. Today, I'm proud to introduce the new chief of Ridgefield PD. He's got decades of experience, a decorated career, and a vision for this department. Please give a warm welcome to Chief Marcus Bennett." From the side entrance, Marcus stepped forward. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to him, Officer Kyle Stevens included. His face went pale as recognition dawned. Marcus walked calmly to the podium, setting a folder embossed with the Ridgefield PD seal down in front of him. He scanned the room, meeting the eyes of every officer in turn. "Good morning," Marcus began, his voice steady. "My name is Marcus Bennett, and as of today, I am your new chief of police." The silence was thick. No one dared move. Kyle's face had turned a deep shade of crimson, his hands clenched into tight fists at his sides. "I arrived this morning unannounced," Marcus continued, his voice sharp but controlled. "I wanted to see this department through unfiltered eyes, and what I saw was eye-opening. A low murmur rippled through the room. Marcus raised a hand, and silence returned. This morning, one of your own officers disrespected not just me, but the badge, the oath, and the community we've sworn to protect, and he did it with laughter ringing in the background. I want to make one thing very clear: this behavior ends today. Kyle shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting away from Marcus's piercing gaze. Respect isn't optional, it's the foundation of everything we do in law enforcement. Without it, we fail, not just ourselves, but the community that looks to us for protection. Marcus let the silence linger for a moment, his gaze cutting through the tension. This morning wasn't just one man's mistake, it was a reflection of a culture that's been allowed to fester here, but let me be absolutely clear, that culture changes now, and if you can't rise to meet that change, this isn't the place for you. The room remained dead silent. Marcus stepped down from the podium and walked purposefully toward Kyle Stevens, stopping just a few feet away from him. Officer Stevens, Marcus said, his voice low but firm. Kyle flinched, his bravado from earlier completely evaporated. When you spit on me this morning, you didn't just disrespect me, you disrespected this department, this badge, and the community we serve, and that, Officer Stevens, is unacceptable. Kyle stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know. That's the problem, Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp. You didn't care to know, you didn't care to think before you acted. Marcus turned his attention back to the rest of the room. This isn't about punishment, it's about accountability, and it starts today. He turned back to Kyle one final time. Officer Stevens, effective immediately, you are suspended pending an internal investigation. A collective gasp filled the room. Kyle's face turned beet red as he stared at the floor. Marcus turned and walked back to the podium. This is just the beginning, Marcus said firmly. Accountability, respect, integrity, these aren't suggestions, they're requirements, and every single one of you will be held to that standard. As Marcus concluded, the weight of his words hung heavy in the air. The first step toward change had been made, but Marcus knew this was just the beginning. Part 2, the weight of the badge. The briefing room had emptied out, but the tension lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. Marcus stood alone at the podium, his hand resting lightly on the folder. Officer Kyle Stevens had stormed out moments ago, his pride bruised and his future uncertain. Marcus exhaled deeply and headed toward his new office. It was tucked away at the end of a dimly lit hallway. The door creaked as he pushed it open, revealing a modest space, an old wooden desk, mismatched chairs, and walls lined with faded department photos. A small window let in slivers of sunlight. Sitting behind the desk, Marcus let the events of the morning replay in his mind, the spit, the laughter, the cold indifference in Kyle Stevens' eyes. It wasn't just about one man, it was about a culture that had taken root over years of unchecked behavior and silent complicity. The phone on his desk buzzed, breaking his reverie. Chief Bennett speaking. Chief, it's Captain Holloway. I've started pulling Officer Stevens' records as you requested. It's not good, sir. Marcus leaned back in his chair, gripping the phone tighter. How bad? Multiple complaints over the last 3 years, excessive force, inappropriate language during arrests, racial profiling, all swept under the rug by the previous administration. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. He'd seen this pattern before, officers abusing their power, protected by an invisible shield of silence. Get me those records by the end of the day, Captain, and let the internal affairs team know I'll need their full cooperation moving forward. Understood, Chief. Marcus hung up and turned his chair toward the window, staring out at the streets of Ridgefield. The people out there, mothers walking their kids to school, teenagers riding bikes, shop owners opening their stores, they all deserved better, and he wasn't going to let them down. Whispers in the hallway. Over the next week, Marcus made it a point to walk the halls of the precinct daily. He greeted every officer he passed, stopping to introduce himself to those he hadn't yet met. But beneath the polite exchanges, Marcus could feel the undercurrent of resistance. He overheard whispers in the break room. He's just here to shake things up. You see what happened to Stevens, guy's career is over, we'll see how long he lasts. The resistance wasn't unexpected. Change was rarely welcomed with open arms, especially in a place where toxicity had been allowed to thrive, but Marcus didn't waver. One afternoon, as he reviewed paperwork in his office, there was a knock on the door. Come in, Marcus said. The door creaked open, and Officer Rachel Torres stepped inside. She was young, in her late 20s, with sharp brown eyes and a determined posture. "Chief Bennett, do you have a moment?" "Of course, Officer Torres, have a seat." Rachel sat down, her hands gripping her cap tightly. "Chief, I've been here for 3 years. I've seen things that aren't right." Marcus leaned forward, his voice calm. "Go on." She hesitated, glancing at the door as if she expected someone to barge in at any moment. "There's been a culture here, sir. Officers like Stevens, they do what they want, and nobody stops them. And the younger ones, like me, we just stay quiet because speaking up feels like career suicide." Marcus nodded slowly. "But you're speaking up now." Rachel met his eyes. "Because I believe in what you said, sir, about accountability, about respect. I want to do this job right, but I can't do it alone." Marcus felt a flicker of hope amidst the shadows of corruption. There were still people like Rachel, officers who wanted to serve with integrity. "Thank you for your honesty, Officer Torres, you're not alone in this. I'll need officers like you, officers who are willing to stand up for what's right." Rachel stood up, her shoulders squared. "You have my support, Chief." As she left the office, Marcus felt a renewed sense of determination. Change wasn't going to come easy, but it was possible. A community in distrust, the problems at Ridgefield PD didn't stop at the precinct walls, they extended out into the community. Trust between the police and the citizens was frayed, hanging by a fragile thread. Marcus decided to address it head-on. He organized a community open forum at the local Ridgefield Community Center. Flyers were distributed across town, inviting residents to voice their concerns directly to the new chief. That evening, Marcus stood on a small stage in front of a room filled with skeptical faces. Mothers clutched their children's hands, shop owners crossed their arms, and teenagers sat at the back of the room, their eyes filled with distrust. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Marcus began, his voice steady but warm. "I'm Marcus Bennett, your new chief of police, and I'm here to listen." A man near the front stood up. He was in his 50s, wearing a denim jacket and a baseball cap. His voice shook with anger. "Chief, my son was pulled over last year for no reason. The officer humiliated him in front of his friends, made him sit on the curb like a criminal, and guess what? The officer walked away without even giving a reason." A murmur of agreement spread through the crowd. Marcus nodded, his expression serious. "I hear you, sir, and I'm sorry that happened to your son. No one should be treated that way." Another woman spoke up, her voice trembling. "We don't trust your officers, Chief. Every time we see those lights in the rearview mirror, our stomachs drop, we're scared." The vulnerability in her voice silenced the room. Marcus stepped forward, his eyes scanning the crowd. "I can't change the past, I can't undo the harm that's been done, but I promise you this, I am here to rebuild this department brick by brick. We're going to hold our officers accountable, we're going to root out those who abuse their power, and we're going to earn your trust back, one interaction at a time." The room was silent. The skepticism hadn't vanished, but Marcus could feel the faintest glimmer of hope in the eyes of some attendees. After the forum, Marcus stayed behind, shaking hands, listening to stories, and promising follow-ups. He met a young boy named Jalen, who shyly asked, "Are you really the chief?" "Yes, I am," Marcus replied with a warm smile. "My mom says the police don't care about people like us." Marcus knelt to Jalen's level. "I'm here to change that, Jalen, and if you ever need help, you can come to me, deal?" Jalen smiled and nodded. As Marcus walked back to his car that night, he knew the road ahead was long. Ridgefield PD wasn't just a department, it was a reflection of the community it served, and fixing one meant fixing the other. But for the first time since he arrived, Marcus felt something powerful stirring within him: hope. Part 3, The Road to Change. Marcus Bennett sat back in his office chair, staring out the window at the bustling parking lot below. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pavement, and officers moved in and out of the station, their faces carrying a mix of tension and unease. Change was in the air, and it was undeniable. Officer Maria Reyes sat across from him, her hands still nervously wringing the hem of her uniform shirt. "Reyes," Marcus began softly, "acknowledging your silence today isn't easy, but accountability doesn't stop with acknowledgement, it starts with action. Are you ready for that?" She nodded firmly. "Yes, sir, I want to be better, I want us to be better." Marcus leaned forward, his voice steady and encouraging. Good, because I need people like you, officers who recognize the weight of that badge and the responsibility it carries. You don't have to fix everything, Reyes, just start where you are, speak up, set an example, and trust that I've got your back. A small smile crept onto Reyes's face, and she stood, her shoulders squared with newfound determination. As she exited his office, Marcus felt a flicker of hope. Change was often sparked not by grand gestures, but by small, quiet decisions made by individuals willing to take a stand. A community in doubt, the days following Officer Kyle Stevens' suspension were fraught with tension. Some officers resented Marcus's direct approach, seeing him as an outsider who had come to disrupt their way of doing things. Others, however, quietly began to re-evaluate their own behavior. But the real challenge lay outside the precinct walls. Ridgefield was a town divided. Its black community had long viewed the police with suspicion and fear, and those feelings weren't entirely unfounded. Years of unchecked bias, abuse of power, and dismissive attitudes had left deep scars. One Saturday morning, Marcus attended a community town hall at Trinity Baptist Church, a cornerstone of Ridgefield's black community. The pews were packed, and the air buzzed with anger, frustration, and cautious hope. The pastor, Reverend Elijah Carter, introduced Marcus to the crowd. Brothers and sisters, this is Chief Marcus Bennett. He's here not just to talk, but to listen, so let's give him that chance. Marcus stood at the podium, his presence commanding yet humble. He removed his police cap and spoke with raw honesty. I know trust isn't given lightly, it's earned, and I know that the uniform I wear represents pain for many of you here today. I can't erase the past, but I can promise you this, as long as I'm your chief, this department will serve everyone in Ridgefield with respect, integrity, and accountability. The crowd remained quiet, listening. Marcus continued, his voice steady. Change isn't comfortable, it's messy, and it's slow, but it starts with moments like this, with conversations, with listening, and with action. A young boy, no older than 10, stood up, his voice trembled as he spoke. My dad says the police don't care about us, is that true? The room went still. Marcus stepped away from the podium and knelt to meet the boy's eyes. Son, I can't change what your dad's seen or felt, but I can promise you this, I care, and I'll make sure every officer in my department cares too. The boy nodded slowly, and his mother pulled him close, tears brimming in her eyes. The meeting ended with cautious optimism. People approached Marcus, some sharing stories of hurt, others offering hesitant support. It was a beginning, a fragile bridge built on vulnerability and sincerity. The weight of leadership. Back at the station, Marcus continued his daily rounds. He walked the hallways, stopping to talk to officers, asking questions, and listening to concerns. He introduced mandatory training on implicit bias, de-escalation tactics, and community engagement. Some officers embraced the change, others resisted, including Officer Kyle Stevens, who filed an appeal against his suspension. The investigation into Stevens's past revealed a troubling pattern: repeated complaints of excessive force, verbal abuse, and discriminatory behavior, all dismissed or lightly addressed under previous leadership. When Stevens's appeal was officially denied, he resigned in protest, claiming he was being unfairly targeted. His departure sent ripples through the department. For some, it was a wake-up call, for others, it was a line drawn in the sand, but Marcus remained resolute. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcus sat at his desk, reviewing case files. Captain James Holloway knocked and stepped inside. Chief, it's been a rough few weeks, but I think they're starting to see it. The change, the new recruits, the younger officers, they're paying attention. Marcus nodded, exhaustion evident in his eyes, but determination etched across his face. Change takes time, James, but it's worth fighting for. A new day in Ridgefield. Months passed, and the air in Ridgefield PD felt different. It wasn't perfect, deep wounds don't heal overnight, but the culture was shifting. New officers joined the force, many drawn by Marcus's reputation for fairness and leadership. Older officers who couldn't adapt to the new standards quietly left, and those who stayed, they learned, they grew, they began to see their community not as an enemy, but as neighbors deserving of respect. Marcus often made a point to attend community events, not in uniform, but as Marcus Bennett, a man from humble beginnings who believed in justice and decency. At one such event, a familiar face approached him. It was the young boy from the church. Chief Bennett, the boy called out. Marcus turned, smiling as he crouched down. Hey there, champ, how have you been? The boy grinned widely. Good, I wanted to say thank you. My mom says the police are different now, they're nicer. Marcus's chest tightened with emotion. That's all I ever wanted, buddy, for you to feel safe. The boy threw his arms around Marcus in a quick hug before running back to his mother. As Marcus stood, he scanned the crowd. Officers from his precinct were mingling with community members, sharing laughter, shaking hands, and bridging divides that once seemed unbridgeable. In that moment, Marcus knew the road to change was long, but they were walking it together. The final reflection. Late one evening, Marcus stood in the empty precinct hallway, the faint hum of fluorescent lights filling the silence. The walls were adorned with photos of officers at community events, commendations for acts of service, and letters of gratitude from Ridgefield citizens. He placed a hand over his badge, feeling its weight, not just physically, but symbolically. It was a reminder, leadership wasn't about power, it was about responsibility. As Marcus turned off the lights and walked out into the quiet night, he knew the work wasn't over, but in Ridgefield, Georgia, a newfound foundation had been laid, one built on respect, accountability, and the belief that every person, regardless of who they were, deserved to be treated with dignity, and that, Marcus knew, was worth every fight. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to BUP Stories for more inspiring stories.